It is the ultimate showdown between these three shows, this new breed of entertainment that's coming out on streaming services that chronicle the kind of like docudramas based on true stories of big startup failures. And every streaming service seems to be getting into it, except Netflix, which I find really weird. But I've watched them and I don't need to be signing up for another streaming service. Thank goodness for free trials. I've watched them. I'm going to give you a ranking, and there's going to be no spoilers in here. Well, some minor spoilers, but just to really give you some context behind the rankings. But I'm going to rank them based on entertainment value. And that's if you just know nothing about business, you're not interested in big tech, what it's going to be in terms of entertainment value, which one should you watch just to be purely entertained. And as you may or may not know, I'm a startup founder, advisor, and investor. So I have a unique perspective and interest in shows like this. And so I'm going to rank them based upon the value that I see that if you're an entrepreneur, techpreneur, startup founder, which one you should be watching and the reasons to do so. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about Super Pumped because I just started watching Super Pumped. I watched the first episode and I've been doing regular reviews of these shows. I finished my series review of the Dropout and I've been doing videos on Wecrashed. And so I thought it'd be really interesting just to kind of add to the three and round it out. But before we continue, let's talk about the names of these shows because I found these names pretty unique and interesting in terms of creativity. And the prize is going to go to the Dropout. And the reason I liked the name The Dropout is a play on Elizabeth Holmes dropping out of Stanford, but also the drop of blood that Theranos, which was the company, said they could take to do all these tests versus these big vials of blood and these long blood tests that happen. So if you don't know, and here's just a bit of a recap, The Dropout is a story about Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos and how she committed fraud, became the youngest billionaire in the world, female billionaire, which was huge, use in tech, but she was basically just scamming everybody the whole time. Really fascinating story. Theranos no longer exists. The next show and second in terms of creative names is Wecrashed. And Wecrashed is the story of WeWork and the CEO, founder, co-founder, Adam Newman and his wife, Rebecca, took WeWork all the way to astronomical heights. They were the darlings of Wall Street in co-working spaces, and then it all came crashing down. This is not a spoiler because it's true to life that this whole name is about the valuation. WeWork went from 47 billion to $10 billion, and they had to cancel their IPO and all that stuff. So it's all about Wecrashed. We crashed the valuation of the company, and the company was WeWork. So I thought that was pretty creative. WeWork is still around. It's still a company, and to their credit, looks like they're starting to turn things around. And then the final one is Super Pumped. And the reason I like Super Pumped is not because of the name, it's for various other reasons, which I'll get into. But Super Pumped, I didn't think it was the most creative name in the world. It took me a bit to figure it out before watching the show. I was like, I don't see it. I didn't figure it out whatsoever because I didn't catch the connection to Super Pumped and Uber, which is Super Pumped is a story about Uber and the fight in Uber, over Uber, around Uber. Interesting stuff. But Super Pumped is something that the CEO and founder of Uber or co-founder of Uber said he would always say is he was super pumped and everybody should be super pumped around him. Again, not that creative, so it doesn't make he comes third tier, but I have some interesting things to say about the show. So let's take a look at each one. And again, no spoilers here, but I'm going to talk about the Dropout. Dropout from a pure entertainment perspective, for me, gets a total A+. This is an A+ show. It is well acted, well written, well directed, well paced. It is just an engrossing show. It's heartfelt in many ways, completely repulsive, disgusting in other ways. There were characters you sympathize with. And again, it's entertaining because Elizabeth Holmes was a criminal. She is totally breaking the law, but she had this interesting pathology going on, very well acted. I'm sure it's going to be in line for awards come award season. And so from an entertainment perspective, you know nothing about entrepreneurship or don't care to know, entertaining nonetheless, definitely say watch it. Now, from a business perspective, if you are in startups or you're an entrepreneur, I'm going to give this one a C, and it's the bottom of the list for me. And the reason is it doesn't go into the business stuff. There's some light details and information about raising money and all this stuff. But basically what happens is, she raises money and next thing you know, she's a billionaire and she's living in big houses and all that stuff. Doesn't quite explain all the financial dynamics, what happens when you invest in a company like this. And it's just, a lot of it is glamorized as well as dramatized. And so not really valuable, but entertaining nonetheless. And that's the reason I highly recommend that you watch Dropout. As far as the one that I recommend, the Dropout is the top of my list. Now let's get into Wecrashed. So Wecrashed, well, I'm just going to straight out say it. So Wecrashed from a story perspective or entertainment gets a total C- for me. And that's because I just don't enjoy watching this show. It's cringy. None of the characters are sympathetic. They're all POSs from my standpoint, and just, elitist, bougie, you name it. Just, no, I don't enjoy it whatsoever. And so why do I watch it? Well, it goes to my next thing. If you watch my other reviews, you'll know, you can go deeper into the reason I just don't enjoy this show. But from a business perspective, I'm going to say it's a B. And the reason it's a B is at least it goes into some interesting conversations about whether WeWork was a tech company or a real estate company, and whether their hyper growth, they could sustain their hyper growth. And it did deal with things like burn rate. Interesting. They show that WeWork was losing $1.2 million and then sometimes $2.4 million a day. So it actually shows sort of, the business logic behind it, the perspective from the investors and things like that. And so it at least had some redeeming qualities in terms of, okay, how do we take a co-working space? And there's some business lessons in there in terms of the culture that can come out of it, the cultish nature and the delusional sort of nature of startups and different things like that. And the reason they were able to raise so much money. So as far as startup, information, entrepreneurship is concerned, okay, I'm going to give it a B, which is probably the only reason I even watch it. I don't even know if I'm going to finish the series, to be truthful, because I started watching Super Pumped. Now, Super Pumped to me, totally interesting, the battle for Uber. And so this is Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and I haven't seen the Uma Thurman character yet. I'm going to talk about this a little bit, but I found this interesting. The tagline was interesting because there's a play on the surge pricing for Uber when things got busy. You kind of have to be in business to understand. But the whole entertainment aspect of it, I'm going to give this, like a B for the entertainment. And the reason, I think it's a bit overacted and it's a little too stereotypical when it comes to like the boys club and the cockiness, the bravado, the machismo. Yes, if you just look at his smile on there, it just isn't me. It's a little too, again, a little too arrogant in terms of that whole dynamic of, being confident in business. So I'm going to give it a B, but it's still well written. There's very entertaining in different parts, funny in different parts. But where Super Pumped for me really hits the list, and I'm going to go, the Dropout, if I have to recommend overall, it goes the Dropout, Super Pumped, and then Wecrashed. Super Pump gets in a second slot for me because as far as business is concerned, it is a total A. And I'm going to explain a lot of the reason I think it's an A, but let's just say it goes deeper into what it took for Uber to become successful. So once again, top of my tier, if I had to go overall aggregate scores, I'm going to go the Dropout and then Super Pumped and then Wecrashed. So let's dive in a little more into Super Pumped, shall we? So for Super Pumped, I think that one lesson you can take away from all the three of them, which I compared and I saw the theme, was the founder and the CEO matters greatly to a business. And the question is, how much cockiness, arrogance, narcissism, ego, sociopathy does it take to pull off these huge moves and to raise this amount of money out there? And all of them are dysfunctional, like completely dysfunctional. And I would say that of the three, Super Pumped was the least dysfunctional. Travis Kalanick was the least dysfunctional, even though it was highly dysfunctional. And then just Elizabeth Holmes was way out there, super dysfunctional. For me, the person that I just thought the dysfunction in this individual made me not be sympathetic, but actually made me despise the character more, is the Adam Newman character. But all of them are dysfunctional. And it's one lesson from a startup founder perspective. All startup founders, I believe, are dysfunctional to a certain level. I meet a lot of founders on a daily basis. I know a lot of founders, and it doesn't take a brainy genius psychologist, therapist to see their dysfunction. But a lot of founders, successful founders, channel their dysfunction into their leadership, and they become obsessed with a problem, or they become, perfectionists, or they develop sort of this stubbornness that turns into this relentless resilience to accomplish what they've done, and they pull off some amazing feats. You cannot deny that the three of them did some very special things, whether they were adaptive or maladaptive, or whether they were ethical or totally criminally illegal. You can argue to say that they were leaders in their own rights. And for me, it's one lesson that you can take away from everybody there. Now, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, his character Travis Kalanick, who they call TK, it shows what it takes to go and raise investment. And it doesn't go into the initial investment. They've already passed the angel round, which is, the first round of funding, and they're really just going for the Series A. And it just shows what it takes. And, I thought it was very believable in terms of the decision makers of the financing. This is the VC that TK is working with. And to me, I like that relationship, and it made sense for me. And there's lots of interactions, no spoilers, that really teach us a few things about the relationship between the founder and the investor, the VC especially. And the VC being the individual who's got investors behind them that give them money to make decisions to invest in these types of ventures. So here's Joseph Gordon-Levitt and then the real Travis Kalanick. And, hats off to all the casting of these shows. They get people to look like the real life counterparts. And for the most part, everybody can act, right? I would say that, again, I'm not a big fan of the acting in Super Pump, because I think it just kind of is a little too hyperbolic and a little too old boys club type thing, that kind of machismo. I guess Super Pumped, it's like, let's go, just that bro culture, type thing. And, so Joseph Gordon-Levitt, I don't think it's a heavy lift. Elizabeth Holmes' character, played by Amanda Seyfried. Again, my apologies, I keep butchering the name, so I just say it all three ways every time I say it. She did the best acting. And then Jared Leto and Anne Hathaway in Wecrashed, I think they definitely don't phone it in. They're really trying to make these characters the way that I think they are in real life. But again, just no matter how well they act, the story and the characters and everything, just not appealing to me. So pretty good, And at the same time, now that I know, this was the interesting thing. Now that I know what Uber had to go through, I went into this. I didn't know a lot about the Uber story. I knew a few things. One, TK, Travis Kalanick, ends up leaving the company. He's no longer the CEO. He gets replaced. Two, Uber had to fight regulatory environment. Where I live, Uber came in late because they were fighting with the taxi companies. So I saw that. But I respect what Uber did. And that's the reason this scores high for me in terms of business lessons, because Uber disrupted the cab industry. And I learned about the cab industry and how kind of crooked it is, and sort of how Game of Thrones political it can be. And it goes like, it's just, for me, it's just very corrupt and very unfair to the cab owners and the drivers. And so did Uber need someone who is this cocky and arrogant to go and fight those battles in the beginning? Probably. And I'm going to demonstrate a little bit about what it takes. And even though you might not like the Travis Kalanick, you have to really respect what they did in terms of, building a company, building a disruptive company that turned the taxi industry on its head. So after the investment, and he secures investment, then you've got TK giving a speech to his people, rah, rah. That's really common across the three of them. And yeah, just not me. I confess, I have given my share of speeches to staff, but it's all kind of larger than life personas and wasn't really into it. But I do like the team. I like the way they portrayed the team. This is where things are a little different. I find that Super Pumped is a lot more even when it comes to male-female relationship representation, portrayal, and they don't get into anything such as, talking about, and maybe they don't, at least in the first episode, I didn't get anything in terms of misogyny or versus feminism, the patriarchy, all that kind of gender war, culture war stuff. And I really like the cast. I really enjoyed the relationship between the main character, TK, and his mother, played by Elizabeth Shue. Like I said, I haven't watched far enough for Uma Thurman to show up yet. And I like the cast. It was well-rounded, whereas the Dropout was more about girl power and the dynamics between men and women, and, all the challenges that legitimately female founders face. So that became a thing. I think they handled that very well in the Dropout, by the way. And then Wecrashed, it was all about, yes, toxic culture, but then they touched on the feminist part, and it kind of had, the team, it just wasn't, it wasn't palatable. It wasn't good. It can't relate to it. And so if you kind of like that transcendence, guru, positivity, neo-spiritual kind of vibe, then Wecrashed might have been for you. Whereas Super Pumped is just more urban, and you can see this happening in a New York setting, or you can see it happening in Silicon Valley or San Francisco, where it actually did occur. I really like this one character. I'm sorry, I forgot the name, but she's the recruiter for the cab drivers. And I really like the way that she's got executive presence, and man, she's a bulldog. She goes after it and hangs with the boys really well, and doesn't play anything in terms of I'm a woman, hear me roar type thing. But she just gets right in there. And I thought it was really great, especially there's this one scene where she's pitching cab drivers, and yeah, very impressive. I would love to have someone like her on my team as a salesperson for sure. So again, I think really healthy portrayal relationship. Now, I'm only in episode 1, so it might go sideways. And don't spoil it for me if it does, or, you can kind of give me a forewarning, Ed, you kind of put your foot in your mouth, you're making promises, you are but can't cash. Promise checks, your butt can't cash. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I do know that Uber ended up becoming pretty toxic as far as the culture is concerned. But for the first episode, I thought it was well balanced. Now, here's the other interesting thing, business lesson that you can take is that great leaders, always know how to reframe something. And this is a scene, it's not a spoiler, where they get a cease and desist, a legal notice from the taxi industry. And instead of saying it's our death certificate, Travis Kalanick here says it's our birth certificate. It shows that we are disrupting the industry because we're hitting resistance. And I found that really great. I find that a good point. And it's something that definitely I would love to hear in an office, especially if you want everybody to believe in the purpose and what you're trying to do. So this is something we take away. Again, the reason I really like this show from a business and a leadership perspective. Here, we've got the whole politicking going on, and it goes deeper into sort of the levels of corruption and how entrenched the taxi industry is. And so in this scene, Travis Kalanick and the transportation czar, I don't know, the guy in the government in the city office that is basically in the pockets of lobbyists, and he wants to protect the taxi industry, and they're pitching the mayor. And it's really interesting how Travis Kalanick gets the mayor over onto his side. Again, no spoilers, but pretty good. And then he declares, we've won San Francisco, or we've conquered San Francisco. And so their regulatory fight is no longer the main issue. Now, it's fascinating because I've been to Uber's competitor, if you will, in China. I've been in their offices and in their boardrooms and worked with executives, and they beat Uber in China. So Travis Kalanick, Uber says, okay, we're going to go next to New York City, then Berlin, and then Paris and Dubai and all over the place. And yeah, plans for world domination. They couldn't crack China. They lost China. In fact, they sold their operations to China because Didi, the Uber of China, is in a completely different regulatory environment. And one of the interesting things was this battle for the technology. The cab company, the taxi industry, was coming to Uber saying, just sign us and do a licensing deal on your technology, and we're going to make you rich. And very well, Uber would have done really well. But again, my hat's off and my respect to what Uber did. It's kind of like in the beginning when Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, he got an offer to be bought for $1 billion by Yahoo. And he said no. And he subsequently lost his entire executive team because people were like, are you kidding me? We could be rich and all this stuff. He said no, because he believed in something more than money. And this is the same thing with Uber. They really want to take on the taxi industry. And they didn't want to just get gobbled up into it because I can imagine they knew where it would go, and they didn't want to get in that fight. And instead, they want to take the fight directly to the taxi industry and turn it on its head. In China, it's different. Actually, the Didi over there, because of regulatory environment and the government won't get into that, basically does work in the taxi industry, and you can order a cab right on your Didi app. And so they've done business together. And then Didi has gone public in North American exchange, the NASDAQ, and things aren't going that well. And I got a feeling it's because of these regulatory dynamics. Well, I know it's because of the regulatory dynamics. So then the whole thing ends, and no spoilers again, but I thought this was just so fascinating. I didn't realize that this is what Uber did to fight their battles. So in this scene, a new guy comes on, and he's faced with the challenge of trying to figure out how to combat sort of the next move from the taxi industry, which could have completely bankrupt Uber. And, their conversation of it is kind of that moment, light spoilers, not really giving away, but in that moment when in the social network where Mark Zuckerberg is talking, and he's got that guy, I totally forgot his name, but he's the guy who comes in and helps him, and he's the Napster guy, right? And played by Justin Timberlake. Okay, you should know who that is. And then he just says, forget the Facebook, just call it Facebook. And Mark Zuckerberg has this epiphany moment. Well, it's not quite the same in this, but it's really interesting. And I believe this was a real thing that happened on how they use business strategy to get around some of the issues that they were facing. And that would continue because there's a huge fight ahead of them. So I found that incredibly entertaining from a business perspective, and obviously fun to watch at the same time. So that's that. Now, there's one other thing I want to point out here, which makes me it made me cringe a little bit, but at the same time, it made a lot of sense from showing it and from learning from it. So see this guy in the background here? He's interviewing, and no spoilers, he gets the job because they show him working for the company right in the beginning. But what I'm not going to spoil it is the one question that the Travis Kalanick character asks and says, you have to be honest to the question. This way to work here starts to show kind of that toxicity, the bro culture that's going to get into Uber, and the reason he's replaced. And yeah, so you can kind of see things start to unravel, which again, testament to the show in terms of starting to foreshadow all these things. There you have it. That's my review of each one, and then a little more deeper dive into Super Pumped. I hope you enjoy these sorts of reviews, and I just want to make sure that, we enjoy these together and hopefully learn some things along the way. I hope that will continue. I really do. I have high hopes that Super Pumped is filled with these sort of business gold nuggets that I can mine out and talk about after every episode, because I think that would be fun. But we'll see what happens. Thanks for watching. See you next time, if there is a next time for me and this show.